This presentation is an introduction to Integrated Lake Basin Management, ILBM, for managing lakes for their sustainable use. Today we will discuss the unique features of lakes that distinguish them from other freshwater systems, the life-supporting goods and services lakes provide to humanity, and the use of integrated lake basin management to ensure sustainable use. A fact worth noting is that only about 1% of the fresh water on the surface of our planet is in liquid form, and the vast majority of this quantity, more than 90%, is contained in lakes, wetlands, and other standing bodies of water, otherwise known as lentic water systems. Lakes are very important freshwater resources for maintaining human health and well-being and for supporting socioeconomic development. Lakes are also habitats for a wide variety of important flora and fauna. The overriding question is, how can we best manage these critical resources over the long term? So what distinguishes lakes as well as wetlands and other bodies of standing water from flowing water systems such as rivers and streams? First is an integrating nature for all inputs. Lakes receive pressures as a result of human activities from many directions, including upstream, downstream, above, like atmospheric deposition, and below, like lake bottom sediments. These pressures eventually come together, collectively mix, and interact. Some pressures may even magnify other pressures. All this means that lake issues are essentially inseparable. It is virtually impossible to treat only part of a lake. A long water retention time. This refers to the average time water spends in a lake. It means the impacts of the stresses are gradual and incremental. They are often unnoticed until they become lake-wide problems. This also means both the problems and the solutions can take a long time to become evident. Complex response dynamics. The physical, chemical, and biological processes in a lake are complex, with everything essentially affecting everything else. This often results in unpredictable and uncontrollable responses. These unique features must be included when developing lake management strategies that are integrated, holistic, and ensure sustainable use. Now, what are the life-supporting resource values and ecosystem services that lakes and other lentic water systems provide? Ecosystem services that lakes provide to humanity can be classified into 4 categories. The first being resource provisioning services. These are the products and services humans obtain from lakes and other lentic water systems. They are typically considered in monetary terms. For example, water for drinking, growing crops, and livestock, fisheries, or hydropower. Regulating services are the benefits derived from nature's regulation of lake ecosystem processes. For example, flood and drought mitigation, water filtration and purification, and aquatic habitats. Cultural services are the non-material and intrinsic benefits lakes provide to humans, like aesthetics, religious and historical significance, educational resources. Finally, supporting services are nature's underlying services needed to produce all the other ecosystem services. For example, geological and physical features, nutrient cycling, soil formation, and habitat creation. Because of their economic importance, humans tend to focus on the resource provisioning services, often forgetting about the other 3 services because they're not usually considered in economic terms. As a result, the resource provisioning services can easily be overexploited leading to the loss of the important regulating services. And in turn, the continuing loss of the regulating services can ultimately result in the loss of both the resource provisioning and the cultural services, and even the supporting services over time. A lake, therefore, can become completely degraded as a result of human activities, like excessive water withdrawals, eutrophication, pollution, sedimentation, and introduction of exotic species. This means that without the timely conservation of lakes, their life-supporting ecosystem services may disappear. This highlights the necessity of achieving a sustainable balance between the ecosystem services, particularly the resource provisioning and regulating services, which will also maintain the cultural services, all within the context of the supporting services. Determining this desired level of balance and how best to achieve it is a critical lake management goal, one that remains elusive for many lakes. So what is Integrated Lake Basin Management, ILBM, and how can it be used to manage lakes in a sustainable manner? It is important to emphasize that lake management is not a single activity or a project. Rather, it is a process that must continue over time in a gradual and holistic manner, focusing on improving lake basin governance. Its conceptual framework incorporates 6 governance elements referred to as governance pillars. Policies are basically the rules of the game, including regulations, laws, ordinances, and all should have strong implementation and commitment. Flexible and collaborative institutions are needed to carry out and enforce the rules of the game. Broad participation of all relevant stakeholders is important in developing lake management plans. The best available information, including both scientific studies and traditional knowledge, is important for informed decision-making. Consideration of appropriate technologies is important to facilitate achievement of lake management goals, including structural components like municipal treatment plants and dams, and non-structural components like education, economic incentives, and behavioral changes. And finally, sufficient and sustained financial resources are required. Improved lake basin governance requires examination of the strengths and weaknesses of the 6 governance pillars. In regard to policies, for example, key activities would include identifying what lake basin management policies currently exist and determining if they have been properly implemented, determining if these policies have been successful in addressing lake basin management problems, and determining if any new policies are needed to address existing or emerging lake basin management problems. Key activities with regard to institutions would include identifying existing lake management institutions and determining what they do. Also determining their capabilities for facilitating sustainable lake ecosystem services, and identifying needed priorities for reforming existing institutions or even developing new ones. Stakeholder participation would include key activities like identifying the range and magnitude of major lake basin management stakeholder groups, determining what mechanisms currently exist to promote stakeholder participation, and determining if they are adequate to facilitate informed management decision-making. Finally, determining how well the stakeholder groups have been able to influence government plans and programs. In addressing information or knowledge needs for lake basin management, key activities would include identifying the existing information and data for lake basin management decision-making, determining if the existing information is sufficient to facilitate informed decision-making and is informative to all relative lake basin stakeholders, determining whether or not the information and data comprises both scientific and indigenous sources, And finally, determining whether or not regular monitoring is happening and if it is producing useful data for informed lake basin management decision making. When considering technology possibilities, key activities would include identifying the existing technological interventions for water resource development and how effective they've been, and looking at what mix of structural and non-structural technological interventions are currently being used for lake basin management and how effective they have been in addressing the identified lake basin management issues and challenges. With regard to financial requirements, key activities would include determining the level of sustainability of available funding for developing and implementing lake basin management efforts. Also, identifying the potential funding sources available at the national and local level, as well as identifying external available funding sources and other potential funding sources for lake basin management efforts. Successful lake basin management requires continuous evaluation of the effectiveness of the 6 governance pillars within the context of the previously noted unique features of lakes, and continuous consideration of good management practices that involve software, think policies, institutions, knowledge, hardware like dams, waste treatment plants, and other water infrastructure, and hardware, cultural beliefs, and societal values. Also, achieving a good balance between the 4 categories of ecosystem services, all with the goal of ensuring their sustainable use. This also facilitates nature's ability to conserve both aquatic and terrestrial habitats and the vast array of important flora and fauna they contain. Conventional planning processes are often sectorally based, with different sectors preparing and implementing their own plans and with little or no coordination between these different sectors. This process, referred to as the planning gear, describes the current situation in many lake basins. And while the emphasis on the planning gear is necessary, it is usually not sufficient on its own for effective lake basin management. Rather, it must be synchronized with a governance gear directed to accompanying governance improvements. ILBM emphasizes the synchronization, which distinguishes it from other current lake basin management practices. In other words, sustainable lake basin management must involve both the planning gear and the governance gear. This approach is referred to as the ILBM platform process. 2 distinct features of the ILBM platform process include a bottom-up stakeholder-driven approach that's meant to ensure ownership of the management process, and a focus on on-the-ground governance improvements to facilitate immediate and tangible benefits accruing to lake stakeholders at the local level. A logical sequence in developing a lake basin management plan includes first, developing a management goal, identifying options and alternatives to achieve the goal, then selecting appropriate implementation strategies, implementing these strategies with sufficient financial and political resources, and evaluating and refining the plan as challenges and needs change over time. This process can be repeated cyclically as needed to achieve management goals. Ideally, all stakeholders want all 6 governance pillars to be intact and functioning well. However, the reality is that at least some governance pillars may not be sufficient to achieve sustainable management goals for a given lake. For example, inadequate finances, poor participation, institutional fragmentation, or insufficient information and data. At the same time, addressing inadequacies in the 6 lake management governance pillars must occur gradually and incrementally and can take many years to achieve for a given lake. The participation of all relevant stakeholders is important to ensure their ownership of both the problems and the solutions. In summary, achieving sustainable lake management over time is typically a cyclical process consisting of 5 essential steps. The first is to assess the state of the lake and its basin. Next is to identify the problems and resources within the lake basin. Third is to develop the lake basin management plan. Fourth is to evaluate progress toward achieving the management goal. Finally, continue implementing the management plan, recognizing that it may be a cyclical process. Monitoring and data collection is an essential component of each of these steps. Recall that consistency and sustainability of the ILBM process works best when the planning and governance improvement happen together. There are a number of national level cases where the ILBM platform process was implemented for a variety of lake basin situations. Although experiences vary from country to country because of their differing challenges and resources, they all highlight that successful lake basin management is consistent with the ILBM platform conceptual framework, namely, the need for gradual, continuous, and holistic improvement of basin governance, including sustained efforts for integration of institutional responsibilities, policy directions, stakeholder participation, scientific and traditional knowledge, technological possibilities, and funding or financial prospects and constraints. In conclusion, it is important that we recognize and appreciate that we all live in basins with linked loadic and flowing water systems and all of their management challenges. ILBM provides a means of facilitating the ability of both humans and nature to thrive productively over the long term. Thank you to those who assisted in preparing this presentation. Inputs and suggestions were provided by a range of United Nations and other international organizations and agencies. Their assistance is gratefully appreciated. Thank you, and we hope this presentation gives you an increased appreciation of the global and local importance of lakes. To learn more about the Integrated Lake Basin Management Platform, please visit the International Lake Environment Committee website. There you will find a range of relevant publications on this topic, all of which are freely downloadable. Some are also available in several languages, including English, Spanish, Italian, and Japanese.